Good night. How everyone doing tonight? God is good and God is good all the time. My name is Ernest, your spiritual divine. I'm here to give you a word on tonight. And the topic of the suffering and the glory of the servant. So this story about that God will give us hope for a servant who will be wise, and God's defeat of evil so that we all can be saved and be rescued from the human condition. The servant that will save us from sin and that in restoration of the love of God that lead to true life. So this story gonna come from Isaiah 52, verse 13 to 15. So see my servant will act wise, and he will be rise and lifted up and highly exalted. You know, so the servant they're talking about is Jesus. Saying, see that he will bring a servant, and he will act wise. Jesus was very wise, and he will die and raise. Jesus will be highly exalted of his sacrifice. So the suffering and the glory of the servant through which God saved mankind from sin and death. Just as there was many who was appalled at him, and his appearance, was so disfigured beyond that of any man in his form merged beyond human likeness. So as many was astonished at Jesus, but not so much at the miracles, or the doctrine, or what he taught, or the work that he did, or his greatness and glory, dignity, although very wonderful, but as his humiliation, the appearance that he made, the low esteem that he was brought into, and the suffering and the death which he underwent. So when Jesus came on board, so they all, was whispering, you saw the videos, they were like, oh, that's him, that's the king, so they didn't really take him in like they were supposed to. Because during Jesus' journey, he was rejecting and everything else, So he went through a whole lot of stuff, some of the stuff that I'm going through now, So his appearance wasn't welcome that, from everyone, But they had so many people love him, and so many people reject. Even when he went home to his hometown, they reject. So pretty much I'm going through almost the same thing that he going through. So the one that was brought low should be rise so high, because he was a king, the throne, and everything. But people just treated him like he was low, but he was high, and sometimes it be that way. Sometimes it be like, people can treat you so low, and all the while, he was a high figure, and he was broken down in distress that his great sorrow had left their mark on his fame. Because Jesus was history. He broke that mark. You know, he was broken, he was beaten and everything else, died on that cross, but he still left a mark behind, because that's all we talk about. He made history. He was broke down, but guess what? 3 days later, he rise right back up. Mary was more than any man, and his bone was more than a son of man. Now he was immediately a workmanship, the divine spirit, and without sin. Do you know when Jesus was a teenager? He was working crafting. He was building stuff. That's why when he came back home, they were like, "That's him, the crafter." So he was seemed like he was just an ordinary person. That's why he with his disciples, he didn't um, treat them like he was just their king. That's why he looked at them and always called him master. So yes, he was he was with so much suffering, on this earth. He did with so much suffering on this earth, pretty much at his last days, suffering on this earth. Now his grief and sorrow that he bare and trouble, he met with, it pretty much met him at ultimately at the end of his life. You remember the first time they tried to arrest him in the it wasn't his time yet. They had to let him go. To injure, damage, and disfigurated, both faces and body was heavy merged more than in the human past, present, and future. You know, the pain that he suffered, we can't even compare our pains to his. You know, we can't even compare our pains to his. Because his face and body were heavily merged more than in the human past. You know, so where he sprinkled many nations. 15. So he will sprinkle many nations, and king will shout their mouth because of him. So he's saying once he sprinkled through the nation, they will shut their mouth. They was mocking him and everything else. They didn't give him the kind of appearance that he thought he was gonna get when he came on this earth. But he let them know, he was a wonderful person, a wonderful teacher and everything. So sprinkle many nations. It means so will the nation give him honor. King will keep quiet, because of him, for what he for what had not been made clear to them they would see. You know. So they never had no one to preach to them. You know. They had nobody to preach to them in the Old Testament. So that's why he said when they start seeing his wonders, they ain't gonna have no other choice but to keep their mouth shut. And they will give their mind to what had not come to their ears. So he gonna preach that word. He gonna bring it to their ear. Bring it to the ear something that they never heard before. Cause they never had nobody preach to them until Jesus came along. For what they were not told, they will see, and what they have not heard, they will understand. Because he teach in parables. He tell it in a story. So he gonna make sure they understand. He gonna make sure they understand. So what he about to preach to them, what they never heard before. Because they never had a preacher. They never had nobody to teach their word to them. Even in the Old Testament. God gave Abraham and Moses a little glimpse of Jesus, but not too much. See, God not gonna give you all the whole detail. He give them a little touch of it, but that was supposed to be held for the New Testament. So that's why God didn't give them the full information on what was going to take place. So in the Old Testament, there was no one to preach to them. They never heard no preaching word besides, Moses wrote up a little commandment and stuff like that, but that was it. They had nobody really to preach that word to them. And in the New Testament, they ain't had nobody preach the word to them until Jesus came along. So they came along. Jesus came along in the New Testament. And Jesus had preached their word, and they understand. They did understand because he taught that word in parable. So the Gentile, Gentile had, heard the and to them, but God commanded to them that it could not talk the things of the gospel and what related to Christ until it was permanent time. And see, that's what I was saying. So in the Old Testament, the Gentile, God was giving them a little something, but he wasn't giving them the full gospel because it wasn't a permanent time yet for the Jesus' name to be brought up or be preached on in the Old Testament. Because he never set foot in the New Testament yet, so it couldn't be told. So So that's why the Old Testament, they had nobody to really preach to them. They know about the Red Sea, and pretty much that's it. They know about the Israelite, So Jesus Christ in His gospel, are seen and understood by spiritual men, that who besides having a revelation that's given to them, So Jesus gave them revelation. Jesus gave them everything, taught everything to them, and the gospel preached unto them, had their eyes has opened. See when Jesus had preached that word to them, their eyes start opening up. And indeed new eyes and understanding. So had given to them. So that they will have a sight of Christ. Of the glory and the beauty and the fullness of the person by faith. You know, through the glass of the word, and so as to approve of him of his doctrine. So Jesus gonna preach that word to them. It ain't something they ain't never heard before. Their eyes gonna open up, to new sight, to new hearing that word, so it's something they ain't never heard before. So that's how Jesus said he was gonna shut them up. He gonna shut them up by preaching that word to them, something they never even heard before. Nobody never preached them. Besides John preaching the coming of the Messiah. So that was it. So Jesus is a suffering servant. Jesus is a suffering servant. He actually bore the punishment, of those who rejected and wounded him. You know, he humbled suffering that led to healing and redemption that could overcome all form of oppression. Now Jesus suffered and he died for our sin and rose back up 3 days later. You know, so that's the glory of the suffering, from Jesus. So one, we know that the servant is Jesus. Two, he is the one that came on earth and he was very wise. So three, Jesus was highly exalted. Even though they treat him low, but he already was high. When he came down here, he already know who he was. You know, he know who he was because when the parent went to Jerusalem, then they came home, they didn't realize the child wasn't even with them. He was with the adults reading that Bible, studying that word, so he know who he was supposed to be. You know, so for his appearance on earth, they were astonished. See, when he came on earth, they was astonished. They weren't even expecting what they were expecting because he came in as a human being, as a regular person. They was looking to see something else. But that's how God do. God will take a regular person, and look what he did Mary. Mary was a regular person just on the field. He picked her to put Jesus in. He'll pick ordinary people and build them up. He ain't gonna he ain't gonna take nobody that's Hollywood. He gonna take an ordinary person and he gonna build them up. So five, he had greatness and glory. You know, Jesus had greatness and he had glory because he had the Holy Spirit, he had everything. He was able to heal. He was able to take demons and all that out of people. He had greatness and glory. So six, he also suffered and sacrificed his life for the whole nation. You know, for the whole nation. Now seven, he was brought low. They treated him like he was low, but he was brought so high. He was just so high. Because sometimes you can have a big label on your name, but still look like an ordinary person. And sometimes people just treat you like you're so low. And all the while, you something big. So eight, sprinkle men and nation. Sprinkle men and nation is spreading that seed through all the nation. Preaching that word to all the nation. Making sure they got it. He preached through the whole nation. So in the Old Testament, there was no one to preach to them the gospel besides the little commandments that Moses was writing up. You know, that's all they know. They didn't know too much about the gospel, you know. Until Jesus came along. That's why he said it was it will be nothing. It gonna be nothing they never heard before. You know, they nothing they heard before, but they will understand. You know, that's what we say. Nothing they heard before, but they will understand. You know, because Jesus is gonna teach in parables. He gonna teach it where they will understand. You know, so this the this the suffering and the glory of the servant. You know he suffered before he left the earth. You know, but he rose back up 3 days later. You know, that's glory. You know, and he is the servant. You know, he is the servant. You know, so he suffered. He suffered, but he rose back up 3 days later, and that was glory. You know, glory that in the servant, and that was Jesus. Jesus was the servant that had suffered so much pain. You know, so that's all the word I have for you today. And we just have to remember, always give Jesus thanks, you know, because he suffered and he sacrificed his life for all us, you know, for the whole nation. That's a sprinkle on the nation was, you know, spreading that seed all over the nation, just preaching that word, you know, making sure they get it, making sure they understand, you know. And when he rose back up 3 days later, that was glory, you know, that was glory. You know, he was a high profile, but he was treated as low. You know, and some of us like that. You know, you can have a high profile and still get treated low. You know, but he rise back up 3 days later. He was very high in his altar. You know, and and a lot of people did not respect him, and had so many people did love him. You know, you can't please everyone, but what he did was being loved. He was being loved. But remember Mary. Mary loved him. You know, so he had a lot of people that love him, and you also will have a lot of people that reject him. You know, so I hope y'all have a blessed night, and I'll see y'all in the next video.